Here, lovely, beautiful piece of moss, and we're at the end of winter. And look, as green as can be, they're very ancient beings, and they're very resilient. They can dry out for a long period of time, and then when there's water again, they immediately become green and full of life again. And moss always evokes in me this feeling of the resilience of life, the strength of life that's pervading everything. En dan neemt ten minste 10 minuten, mag ook best iets langer, nog zelfs een kwartier, maar dat je zult merken dat het best lang is, om te kijken en dan je kiest zelf. I've worked as an ecologist for a big part of my life, and largely in nature conservation. But since my student days, I've always asked myself the question, why do we treat the planet the way we treat the planet? And that, of course, is a philosophical question. And that's why, as a student in ecology, I also started the study of comparative religion and philosophy. And that has become very much the major theme of my work. On the one hand, nature and nature conservation, but on the other hand, how do we relate to our planet and to nature? I don't even like the word nature, because the word nature immediately sort of evokes a separation between us humans and our culture and a natural world, and I think that's a fallacy. We're part of nature, and so I'd rather speak about the beauty of life, or the great community of life. And that great community of life evokes an enormous amount of love within me. I love the variety of life and the beauty of all living things. So that has always inspired me to do what I do. Many of the problems that we have in our present day and age all have their root cause in basically the question, who do we humans think we are on this planet? And that answer in our civilization has been answered for the last 2,000 years by saying, we're very special, we're exceptional, and we're different from all the rest, and this basically is all ours. This is our garden to play in. This is a storehouse of goods and services for us. Yeah, and in that way we have exhausted this beautiful community of life because we have made it suffer and made it very, very impoverished. And this is the time that we have to realize, in the first place, that we're also part of nature. This is our family, and that we need to restore that relationship. And it's not just about restoration of landscapes. It's also about restoration of our relationship with the world. And that is more than just restoring a place. It demands a different sense of being, and that's a collective effort. We need to have a dialogue on who we are, what this world is, and how we relate from various different angles. And in that way, to restore a sort of harmonious relationship with the greater family that we're part of. Oogst van Morgen, it's not just about regeneration or whatever, that's all very technical, but it also involves, I would say, mind and soul. There was a political scientist in the US who wrote in the 70s, not long after a report, the Club of Rome had appeared, a very, very significant viewpoint. He said, there's no greater misconception than to think that the environmental crisis, that was called in those days, has to do with plant and animal species becoming extinct, with human-made ugliness and polluted environments. They're all part of it. But the deepest sense is the environmental crisis, a crisis of mind and soul, and has to do with the question, who do we think that we are on this planet as humans, and with what we need to become to create a sustainable future for ourselves and the rest of life on this planet. And Oogst van Morgen is about this. What we need to do and need to become in order to create a sustainable future, not only for ourselves, but a greater community of life. And that makes it for me very special. It's not just restoring landscapes or restoring ecological processes. No, it's restoring a community of which we are part. And in that way, creating something that I dislike the word sustainability, create something that brings well-being not only to us, but to our co-inhabitants of this wonderful planet. What I find a fascinating image, and that's also something you find in the philosophy of common land, is an image that stems from ancient India. In ancient India, there was the idea that you had different zones in the landscape. And the first zone was the human zone. That's where humans are first. That's the village or the city. And there can be some wild plants and animals, that's okay, but that's our first place. That's where we do our things. And then you had a second zone in the landscape, which was called the Shrivan, the domain of the goddess of Shri. And Shri is the goddess of fertility. That's where you did your agricultural practices. And wild plants and animals were allowed to be there as long as they didn't cause harm or damage. And they were removed, not killed, but removed. Then you had the next zone, and that was called the Tapawan. That's the area or the forest, the wilderness, where you could practice spiritual practices. That's where people went to withdraw from the mundane world to meditate. And the rule there was that as a human you could be there, but you were not allowed to harm animals and plants. So that's a different perspective already. And we have these zones basically in our environment as well in the West and also in the Netherlands. We have, of course, the cities and the villages. Then we have our agricultural land, and whatever the plants and animals that cause damage, we remove them. Then we have nature reserves. And there's always signs that you can be there and recreate. And recreate means basically reshape yourself, refine yourself. But you're not allowed to harm the wild plants and animals. So those zones we have in the West as well. But then there was a last zone in India, and that was called the Mahavan, the big forest, and that's a place where we were not supposed to go. That belonged to nature herself. And I find this a beautiful image of partnership. In a good relation, the two partners both have their own identities and their own worlds and the space in which they continuously meet. They don't merge, because that's not a partnership, that's a folie à deux in French, and that's madness. But you have to have your own world and identity and a place of encounter. And that for me would be the ideal way of looking at the landscape here in the Netherlands in the future. We have the areas where humans have primate, where we are first, cities and villages and whatever, urban areas. We have a number of areas which we basically, I would almost say, give back to nature. And some of them I would feel we're not even supposed to go anymore. That's another world. And in between, we meet. That's why we try to find partnerships in agriculture and infrastructural developments, and whatever we do, continuously try to find partnerships. And in that way, I think that even a densely populated delta that we have, it's possible to create a future of well-being for both humans and non-human inhabitants of this country. There is something wonderful happening. When I was young, when I was 20, we would say, and that happened of course because I was a hippie in those days, that plants and animals are our partners, or that we participate in the world and we're part of a big web of life. People would say, Jesus, that's wishy-washy Californian hippie new age thinking. Now, many people feel that we're part of all of this, that we're not separate from a non-human world. This whole image of belonging in a greater community of life is becoming more and more common, is emerging as a new world view. And it becomes quite natural now for my students to say, of course, we're part of nature. And that gives me hope, because something new is emerging in our worldview. We don't see ourselves anymore as owners of this planet. And that gives me a lot of hope, because a lot of new movements and all kinds of enterprise and projects emerge from this new idea of partnership or participation with this wonderful community of life. We are connected to the non-human world. Basically, we have emerged from nature, and our DNA still knows this. And deep down inside, we know this. I mean, when we walk in an area like this, I don't know whether you realize that immediately your production of the stress hormone cortisol reduces. Your immune system awakens. Your blood pressure goes down, etc., etc. Our body still knows that this is where we stem from. And our mind still knows it well, but we have thought ourselves separate in our thinking from this world that we're part of. So re-establish that connection, refine it. It is still there within us, so bring it back. It brings not only a great sense of joy, but also a sense of belonging. And then from that feeling of, let's say, connectedness, do your work in this world. Meaning, in whatever you do, always do it from the viewpoint that you're part of a bigger community. Whatever you do. And you can do it at a small scale in your home, in your garden. You can do it in your daily practices, in what you buy, in how you consume, etc., etc., and in how you work. And above all, share this joy of life. Share this great feeling of being privileged to be part of a larger community of living beings. Because in that sharing, we re-find a communal joy of being alive, and that automatically makes us more sustainable in how we deal with our earthly home.